The following is an official lore video of the Dark Diaspora Universe, a journey in world-building project.
The white coffee mug, emblazoned with the Fringe World Alliance crest, fell from Nigel's hands. The disparate chatter of the mining workers that had moments earlier filled the break room of the prefabricated amenities building was suddenly drowned out by a blaring alarm. The underground mining operations of Corrix were never a quiet place, and warning alarms, sirens, and automated announcements combined into a constant and overbearing cacophony. But this was different, annoyingly obnoxious so as not to be ignored. Nigel felt a wave of fear and panic course through his body, threatening to overtake him. Yet his training and experience suppressed this involuntary response. He had prepared for this, Nigel thought to himself, as he and his mining crew exited the rudimentary break room and out into the underground mining tunnel. The tunnel in which they emerged was an expansive void, the broadest extent of a major rare earth ore vein Nigel's crew and several others had been working on for the best part of a decade. The gray stone walls had been roughly hewn by chewing mining equipment, and the ceiling was supported with steel-reinforced concrete pylons and micro-anti-grav manifolds. The void was 150 feet in diameter and had proven an ideal location for a forward staging base for the mining operations. Nigel and his crew exited the amenities building and peered up to the tunnel ceiling above them, surveying the stone for any signs of danger. They all knew what the whooping and droning alarm meant, and within seconds, Nigel had spotted a sickly green discoloration in the center of the tunnel ceiling, with an oozing viscous liquid dripping into a rapidly gathering puddle on the compacted stone and dirt floor. And then, the slime puddle began to move. "Slime Seep!" Nigel yelled, pointing to the slime. The crawling slime, mindless in its ravenous hunger, moved with shocking speed towards a nearby concrete pylon. Nigel wasted no time, ushering the men and women of his crew of 10 towards the far end of the tunnel opening. As they ran, he watched as the slime reached the bottom of the nearest pylon before effortlessly climbing upward along the pylon shaft. It was then that Nigel saw the crack. It had been over a year now since Nigel and the other crew leaders had reported the deterioration in the pylon casings. Cracks had begun to emerge in recent years as the concrete reached the end of its life, but the mining office of Fringe World Alliance had rebuffed their request for replacements, rating the structural integrity of the pylons as sufficient and the chances of a seep 3,600 feet below the surface as impossible. Clearly, they were wrong. The climbing and grasping slime pool, one of several that had now gathered from the seep breach above, made its way straight to a large crack in the concrete casing. Within moments, the steel beam within the pylon was eagerly consumed by the slime, dissolved and absorbed by the alien biological with discharging heat. And then the pylons began to fall. Nigel and the crew were halfway to the emergency capsules by the time several of the pylons began to buckle. Without the support of the pylons, the micro-manifolds were insufficient to retain the weight of the stone ceiling, and soon, the small seep breach grew into a large chasm. And then the trickle of slime turned into a torrent, just as Nigel and his crew reached the emergency capsules. The ravenous slime poured into the void of the mining tunnel like a flood, a wave of gurgling green flowing into the space and eagerly crashing against the mining equipment and the prefabricated structures of the mining base camp. Nigel held open the hatch-like door and the emergency capsule and ushered in his crew, all while watching the wave of slime flow towards him. He saw other crews, whose leaders had been less responsive to the alarm, engulfed by the wall of slime, their screams of pain and agony from their sudden envelopment and consumption heard over the echoing of the slime's utter destruction of the camp. Nigel escorted the last of his crew into the capsule and then stepped in himself through the opening, closing the hatch behind him and activating the anti-gravity arrays of the capsule. Nigel was forced to his knees from the sudden levitation of the capsule as the slime finally reached its target, the green wave seemingly cresting upwards and over to envelope the capsule. Yet, the alien biological could not make contact with the capsule's metallic surface, with tiny anti-gravity manifolds spread evenly across the spherical surface of the capsule, acting as a type of force field and buffering against the creature's desperation. Other capsules, filled with desperate crew teams, friends, and work colleagues of Nigel, were less fortunate. Several did not have time to close the hatch or activate the anti-grav fields. The slime was ruthless in exploiting the crew's delayed response and consuming them and their capsules within moments in a display of mercilessly efficient consumption. Of all 6 emergency capsules, Nigel was the only one to survive the onslaught, and soon it autonomously maneuvered itself away from the slime and towards the surface through the rest of the mining tunnel. Nigel crawled over to his seat and pulled down on his safety harness, allowing himself to take a deep, steadying breath for the first time in minutes. Shocked by the suddenness of the cataclysm he had just experienced, a fury and anger burnt within Nigel at the incompetence and lack of vigilance of his employers. Their greed in the face of immense danger had cost lives and millions of credits in lost mining equipment. He hoped that someone would be held accountable, but over 20 years of working for the FWA meant it was unlikely. People had died, and Nigel knew better than most that the slime would never stop its conquest of the planet's depths.
Hey!